Hi friends, this is Marilyn again from tarotclarity.com, and today's video is going to be a demonstration video on the Tirage and Croix spread. Now it may seem odd to you that I'm going to be describing a spread, an established spread, especially since my last video was essentially about making your own spreads and doing things your own way. But sometimes we're not quite there yet. And, existing spreads serve a purpose, especially when you're learning. And the Tirage and Croix is not a bad spread to have in your repertoire. In 1887, I believe, under the direction of his mentor, Oswald Wirth created a deck, this deck, with white background, 22 cards only, and because he was an occultist, he used the word arcana. I use the word trump or triumph cards, because I don't subscribe to Kabbalistic teachings, but as you can see on his cards, there is reference, which I tend not to use. I already know the meanings of the cards. This would be an additional support, but I already know what the cards mean, so that's not a clue for me. The image itself is the clue for me. Then, I believe in 1926 or 27, he wrote a book, which in English is called The Tarot of the Magicians. I think the actual literal translation would have been like Tarot Images from the Middle Ages, but the book itself is called The Tarot of the Magicians, if you get it in English. I got mine in either the late 80s or the early 90s, something like that. Let's see. Okay, I got the second printing in 1990. So it's an old book, and I believe that it's been reissued in a later edition. I don't know when, but you probably won't be able to get this copy, but you'll be able to get a copy. And the value of this book for me in the beginning was, although I had already probably been reading for 15 years, when this book came out, it was one of the few books that I could get my hands on that were remotely linked to the TDM or the Best in Song style that I actually was using. I was using really the 1JJ Swiss, which is not really, it's not really a TDM, but this was more similar to the deck I was trying to teach myself to use. And I had already taught myself, probably at this point, I had already taught myself. I had already come up with my own system. But this was one of the first books that I could find in, where I grew up that had information. Now, I had determined by that point that I really wasn't interested in the Kabbalistic teachings. They held no interest to me. By then I knew what the meanings of the cards were. However, I still found it very interesting to read. If you do want to buy his deck and you want to understand his deck, or you're interested in Kabbalistic teachings, this is not a bad resource. And the one message that I do remember after having read it was that he himself says, study the cards before you pick up a book, right? Have an intimate relationship with the cards, and don't feel as though someone else is the authority. You are the authority. That always stuck with me, And at any rate, I'm going to use this particular deck. This is the one he created in 1887. The one with the gold is, I think, the one that accompanied his book. He just re-released the deck and, gave it, I think he made some changes to it and just gave it like a gold foil. The publisher of this deck that I have is Marco Benedetti, and he has a couple versions. He has one where it's artfully done and you get a fancy box and there's real gold foil on the cards, and I hear it's breathtaking. And it's the one I had intended to purchase, but I somehow ended up getting redirected to his Game Crafter link, where he does have tarot decks for, reduced, they're not as expensive as an art deck. And I ended up getting the Game Crafter version instead. The Game Crafter version also comes with a third deck, which is just black and white drawing. That's it. But I like the original because I think it looks best on the computer, for a video. Plus, I just like it better. So this is the one I'm going to use. And I'm using his deck because I want to honor that he was the creator of the spread. And I just kind of like to do things that way. I like to acknowledge, I like having the connection, if I'm using someone's spread and they had a deck of cards that they created, I'm going to use their cards. Now, his deck was only 22. As I'm not sure if I mentioned this or not, but he called these cards Arcana, the higher Arcana, versus Trump or Triumph. I used the word Trump or Triumph because I don't subscribe to Kabbalistic teachings and I'm not an occultist. But he was, and so he referred to these as cards of the higher Arcana. Now, I think I've covered everything that you need to know for this purpose about him and the deck. Okay, now let's say, and this is a fictitious situation, and here's the box, by the way. It doesn't have Marco's name anywhere on the box, but you can go get it over at Game Crafter. And if they have an account, look for Marco Benedetti or Oswald Wirth. You can get it there. Okay, so let's say our client is very upset. She has a very unfortunate circumstance, which many times our clients do have unfortunate circumstances, right? And they need clarity, or they can't tell their family members anymore because the family members have given them all their advice, and they're tired, of hearing the same story over and over. And, sometimes they're at their wit's end and they just want validation that what they're going to do is the right thing to do. Or they just want to hear someone else say, or to give them any advice that, they might not have thought of. In this case, let us say that a woman is thinking of leaving her partner. And she's leaving him, let's say, because he's been abusive. And let's say, furthermore, that she has children. With handling and mixing these cards, my intent is for demonstration purposes only. This reading is not intended for any living person. It is not applicable to any living person. This is strictly for demonstration purposes and for teaching how to do this spread with this particular question. I think it's very important that you establish whether you're practicing or whether you're doing it for a real person. I think it's very important to make clear to your higher self, your higher person, that you're very clear on your intent. It's not for a person. For me, it's for use as a demonstration. If I were doing it for a client, it would be to give that person the best possible meaning, the most meaningful meaning that they can make the most sense of, right? And so in this case, my intent is to do a reading or a demonstration that will most benefit you, the viewer, okay? Okay, having said that, we're going to lay the cards in the configuration established by Oswald Wirth. The number one position is a position of what is working on her behalf. What are the pros of her situation? The second card represents the cons. What works against her? The third position might be seen as where to focus her energies or the advice card. The fourth card is the likely outcome. Now, I'm not positive, but I think that Oswald Wirth may have been the one who created the concept of the quintessential card or quintessential message. And which is the thing I like to do, right? You've heard me say that before. And I believe how he came upon it was to add, the numeric values of his cards, subtract 22, and come up with the corresponding number to whatever card in the deck. So we have 13 and 1, that's 14. 14 and 3 is 17. 17 and 15 is 30. 17 and 15 is 32. Now, if we subtract 22 from that, which is I think how he did it, he come up with 10. Some people might add 3 plus 2 and get 5. But in honor of him, we're going to do it his way, and we're going to pick the Wheel of Fortune as the quintessential message. Now, some people don't like doing a tallying up. They don't like tallying up to get the quintessential card. And where is it? They don't like doing that. And so what they will do is just pick the next card on the stack. Say what? There it is. So in this case, if we were to not tally up the numbers and we were to just pick the next number, the next card, that would have been the Hanged Man. That would have been the quintessential message. I think the important thing is to pick a method and then stick to it. And when you're, handling and mixing the cards and you're doing your meditation, going in which card it's going to be. Is it going to be a tallying up or is it going to be the next card, right? Okay, so this is what we have. So as I mentioned, we have a woman who is thinking of leaving her partner who has been abusive, right? And she's pretty much made up her mind. She maybe isn't really even asking a question, but she just wants to know, what does she have to look out for? What are the things that, she has to worry about? Okay. The first card, which looks scary, but it's working for her, not against her, is the Death card. Now, what does this mean? And, the death means ending, something coming to an end. And because it's in the position of pros, the suggestion here is you are totally on the right course of action. Ending this relationship is the thing to do. End it. Okay? That's in the pros column. That is, the reinforcement that she's doing the right thing. In the cons could represent perhaps someone who maybe she shouldn't trust, particularly since the Magician card, or Le Battleur, appears, right? The Battleur is someone who is underhanded, right? He's a street performer. His game is to take money out of your pocket by sleight of hand when you can't figure out where the ball is in his cup. Now, in this particular card, you don't see the tools of his trade as far as being a con man, but you see, the reference to the four suits of the tarot deck. But interestingly, although he has coins, sword, cup, and the baton in his hand, this deck doesn't utilize 56 pip cards, right? It only utilizes the trump card. So at any rate, I digress. Okay, so, when the Magician pops up, there's a sleight of hand here, right? And so it's possible that she can't trust an individual. This card falls in the position of cons, right? So is there a mother? Is there a mother in the equation somewhere? You know, is there someone that she thought she could trust, but maybe she can't? Maybe she has to keep her strategy close to her chest. You know, maybe she should not be sharing. Maybe she has to use a little trickery. You know, maybe she has to be very clever. This card can mean that there is deception. You know, someone is doing something deceptive, but it could also mean that it's what she needs to do. And since this card falls in the position of what to focus on or advice, it could be, you could be doing double duty. Be careful of who you trust. And at the same time, you might have to be a little bit sneaky. You know, you have to be clever. Now, the quintessential card in the center kind of says, you know, it kind of gives like an overall sense of the nature of the situation, right? And so we have the Wheel of Fortune. So what does the Wheel of Fortune suggest? Well, change, right? Death, abrupt endings, life goes on, change. Change is called for, right? So this is a transitional period of her, you know, of her life. It requires abrupt endings, adaptability, being able to go with the flow, knowing who to or not trust, and also being willing to engage in a certain amount of subterfuge in order to extricate herself from a dangerous situation. If he's abusive, it certainly can be a dangerous situation. The final outcome card is the bottom card. Given the circumstances and given the likely outcome, there's a bondage, you know. There's a sense of being tied to or dependent upon or addicted to some aspect of that relationship or that dynamic, which is very difficult to extricate herself from. It's possible that she'll have a really hard time freeing herself from his spell or his, you know, her perceived power of him over her, or her need for him in some way. Maybe he's very clever about, you know, remember, this is a card of deception too, right? So maybe he's very clever at, you know, bringing her back into the fold. And so her greatest risk is a return or dependency. And I would, you know, I would totally express that very plainly, that I would be fearful that she will go back on her conviction and that maybe she will somehow, you know, not let go in the way she should. So it, you know, you can't, you can give people information and you can give them insights, but you can't necessarily force them to do anything. And you could, you know, when you see something like this and you think in your heart, oh man, she's going to go back to him, you could just express, you know, other aspects or features of this card and the meaning of the card, and that it, you know, it's, you're going to feel like, you know, you can't extricate yourself from him because maybe you feel that, you know, you have a dependency on him, like monetarily or some other, you know, reason. But the reasons, you know, the reasons are false, right? You know, this guy doesn't necessarily, you know, give us the truth, right? He's not known, even though he's the light, you know, the light bearer or whatever he was, you know, Lucifer was called. You know, it's perhaps false information, particularly since we have the appearance of the con man, right? Since we have the appearance of the bateleur. So you see that the bateleur plays off a few of the cards. You know, it plays off of this one, and it plays off of, you know, this one. Also, these two cards in proximity to one another, the end, you know, the end, the validation of the end, you know, that is definitely the right course of action, right? And then the wheel saying, you know, life goes on, move forward, go with the flow, right? But then we have this bondage card, which is concerning because maybe at this stage of the game, she doesn't have the will or the power, or she doesn't feel she does, which, all the more reason to stress, to be careful who she trusts, right? Be careful who she trusts. At any rate, I hope this has been instructful to you. And it isn't a bad, if you're going to use an existing spread, it's not a bad spread to have. I use this spread because it's a 5-card spread. I can, do it within 10 or 15 minutes. A client doesn't have to spend a whole lot of money, for a 5-card spread. And sometimes financial, factors are a factor. I always, from this day on, not from this day, but at one point I decided that the only way I would do the Tirage and Croix would be using this deck. If I have it handy, I'll use this deck, and only the 22 or the 21 trump cards and the Fool, in honor of the man who created the spread. Now, there is an advantage to only using the trump cards, and that is that no card cuts to the chase quite like the message of a trump card, right? There might be a lot more ambiguity or uncertainty when you use a pip card. And for something especially as important as, a person who wants to leave a dangerous situation, you want cards to cut to the chase, right? And when you're learning, using the trump cards, or as Oswald Wirth would say, the higher arcana cards, it's really, it's a lot easier to use the trump cards in a spread, especially if you're only limiting them to 5, It just makes for an easy read. You saw that was pretty well, that was read pretty easily. And, the Tirage and Croix is a useful spread. It has a purpose, and, I think the nature of the reading, the question that we had kind of works well with the Tirage and Croix. At any rate, I hope this has been helpful to you. Until next time, friends, peace and stay well, and I will have a video tomorrow.